Welcome back here in Indianapolis. The NFL Scouting Combine underway. We are always pleased to have our good buddy Greg Cosell of NFL Films join us, not just weekly for the Install podcast, of which we are very excited to do the live show on Friday, May the 2nd, not even a full week removed from the NFL Draft in Nashville. Greg, this is one of the, as Mike Borgonzi calls them, touch points of the pre-draft process. Just gets us a little bit closer to the main event.
You know, and I got to just tell you, you mentioned the install, which I'm really looking forward to. So I met someone last night who's in the financial services business. They were actually at dinner, believe it or not, at the same restaurant. I was forced to go to dinner with Kirby last night, so I fought through it.
He will put you in his car and just hold you hostage.
I know.
Greg.
I fought through it. So and then I saw this gentleman later in the evening, and he lives in Nashville, and I told him, hey, you got to come to the install, and he put in his calendar. He said, I'm going to be there.
We love to see it.
Yeah, I figured I'd do a little, promotion.
He better get some tickets fast. They're selling quickly, Greg.
Hey, all right. We're
moving fast.
I saw him in his phone, put it in his calendar.
Okay, well then I'll make sure that I'll make sure we put us.
I know he can afford it because he lives in Brentwood.
That's right, all you people in Brentwood listening to the show. We know that you can pony up the $30 to come see the draft show. 1045thezone.com is where you get the tickets, where you can come hang out with Greg and me and so many other Titans fans. 2 consecutive sellouts, and we're looking forward to a third on Friday, May the 2nd. We're looking forward to the testing, which is getting ready to get underway. But Greg, since the Titans have the number 1 overall pick and have been asked a great many questions about these players specifically, you thought that we should go through these players specifically and what the Titans had to say about it, and then we could kind of discuss.
Yeah. I mean, this is the news in the sense of the day because, you obviously had Mike Borgonzi on, you had Coach Callahan on. I didn't hear all that, obviously, so, I'd be curious what they had to say, and obviously they're not going to give away any state secrets,
right.
but you get a sense when you hear coaches talk or GMs talk, just reading between the lines.
And it's a pretty relaxed setting here, and
they,
it's not like a podium where, 7,000 people are throwing questions at this, that, and the other. So I thought we did get at least a degree of transparency at this point in time. So let's start with Travis Hunter, who Mike Borgonzi said he's never seen a player like him before. That's a pretty general statement, but specific to the percentage of snaps that the kid played, the fact that he can be as adept at both positions as he is. Greg, the tape evaluation on him, I imagine, is fascinating because he's doing it all. He's playing damn near 100% of the snaps at both of these positions, both premium positions at the NFL level.
And I'm sure that's what Mike meant by that, because we really haven't seen anybody do that, in a, I don't know, going back, to the 50s or 60s.
Yeah.
And that's really impressive in and of itself. I'm not sure people realize how impressive that is. My guess is that's not going to happen in the NFL. In fact,
I'll tell him that.
Right. I was talking to a reporter from Denver who had a chance to talk to Champ Bailey, obviously a Hall of Fame corner who played wide receiver as well in college at Georgia. And Champ Bailey, who obviously knows more about this than I do, said there's no way he's going to play 130 snaps a game in the NFL. So, he knows more. Maybe he's wrong, but, you have to accept that as a meaningful response. To me, he's a corner as his primary position. I think you create packages on offense for him, but I'd be hard-pressed to believe he's going to play 70 snaps on defense and 60 snaps on offense. I'd be hard-pressed to believe that you can do that in the NFL.
And that's a reasonable expectation. I look at him, Greg, and I understand that, his position is, well, I'm going to do it unless they tell me that they don't want me to do it, and that's his attitude.
And that's wonderful.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. But in reality, there is going to have to be more dedicated training at the position at the NFL level.
And here's the other thing. It's the coaching part during the week, because now you have to be coached in the detail and nuance and subtlety and disciplines of playing in the NFL that have to go through the week. Is there enough time? Are there enough hours in the week for him to be coached that way on two sides of the ball?
Yeah.
It's not just, you're good enough to do it. Just go out there and play receiver.
And Brian Callahan agrees with your assessment about him being a corner. And interesting to hear Andrew Berry, the two teams with the number one overall pick, say, no, we think he's, based on what we've seen or how we view him as a wide receiver, because they're trying to get him 100 touches a year.
And you know what? It's funny. Offensive coach, I've heard Jay Gruden, and I've heard him talk, and he, as an offensive coach, he's thinking, he's a receiver. I want the ball in his hands. Yeah. Offensive coaches think that way, and defensive coaches say, hey, man, he's a corner, because there's not as many corners as there are receivers. Yeah. Theoretically, you can always get receivers. Maybe in Tennessee they don't think like that as much as some other teams.
No, but it's a bitter talking point. They got one, and then they gave him one. We don't have to relitigate that one.
Right, but I mean, the point is, there's always more receivers that you can line up with, and there's fewer so-called big-time corners, and I think his corner tape's good. Like, I wouldn't put him in the corner category. I wouldn't. Maybe others do. And I love these are the conversations I've been having. I've been here for 48 hours, and I've had so many wonderful conversations with coaches, and I wouldn't personally put him, let's say, in the Patrick Surtain category when Surtain came out, and I think Surtain is pretty universally considered the best corner in the league. But there's no question Hunter is a high-level corner prospect.
Relative to the rest of his class, because you and I will obviously do more dedicated positional previews, but relative to the rest of the cornerback class, how do you see him?
He'd be the number one corner. There are others I like. Okay. Like, there's a corner that I'm very anxious to see how he runs. I guess corners are Friday, so today's D-line and linebackers. I'm very curious to see an SEC corner that I'm sure a lot of our listeners know from Ole Miss, named Trey Amos, who's long, pretty athletic. I really liked his tape a lot. I'm really anxious to see him run. To me, he's the kind of guy, and the thing is, 40 times for corners do matter. It's one of the positions where it matters. There's not many where it really matters. It matters for corners, and coaches view it as important. So if Amos runs a 4.41, I think he's a first-round player. If he runs a 4.47, my guess is he'd be a second-round player. Right. But I really liked his tape.
Greg Cosell of NFL Films here with us. We're doing a live version of the install. You can get another live version of the install in the not-too-distant future on May the 2nd. The ticket's available for the live show. Greg's coming into Nashville for a third straight year to give you the analysis that you can't get anywhere else. It's the envy of the league. I know the Bills were jealous of our event last year with Rand Carthon, and obviously we're looking forward to another great one this year where we'll be able to talk about free agency and the draft after the fact. 1045thezone.com is where you go. Abdul Carter, obviously in the news, Greg, a stress reaction in his foot was discovered yesterday in the middle of the medical evaluation.
So he's not going to work out.
And was not planning on working out because of the shoulder anyway.
That's
but
right,
that was an initial development. They're saying it's not necessarily, the reporting from Adam Schefter this morning at least, was that surgery not necessarily advisable for him at this point in time. So we'll see what tact they choose to take. But from a player standpoint, Mike Borgonzi has talked a great deal about building through the trenches. And we know that the Titans struggled to get to the quarterback last year. We'll see what becomes of the Harold Landry development, because they've allowed him to pursue a trade. Which
tells you all you need to know.
Correct.
Right.
How much of an upgrade would Abdul Carter provide to a front like the Titans that has Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat, but not any kind of top-tier pass rush option?
They don't have an edge player. And every team wants to have someone that first obviously can rush the quarterback off the edge, but then the second part of that equation that changes the way offenses, particularly in pure pass situations, have to play against you. Because when you have a big-time edge player, unless you have big-time offensive tackles, very often what you see on tape in the NFL, and let's people remember, that's what we're doing here. We're talking about playing in the NFL now. Very often what you see is teams that have to chip an edge player or keep a tight end or a back end, which means there's one less eligible receiver. So you win the numbers game defensively, theoretically, before the play starts, because now there's one less eligible receiver that's out as a primary option. So Carter I've done him. He's very explosive. He's probably still learning how to play because he was a stacked backer in 2023. So he's still learning how to play on the edge. And again, no player comes into the NFL as a finished product. We know that. But he's clearly explosive. He's a dynamic athlete. He's 200. We didn't get the numbers yet, do we?
Not officially. He looked a little thicker at the podium, but he's not been training necessarily as he recovers.
Right, because he's been hurt.
Yeah.
Right. So he's probably going to be in the 250 range.
Yeah.
And again, you don't want to necessarily say that. I'm always leery of making direct comparisons, but the way in which he was deployed this year at Penn State and the way in which I imagine you would see him deployed in the league is very much like a Micah Parsons.
Yeah. Best prospect in the class to you?
See, we
don't got to do a big board if you don't want to.
No, I may be in the minority, but I really like Cam Ward. So
okay.
I don't know how Mike Borgonzi or Brian Callahan sees him, but I really like Cam Ward. Now I'm not. Carter is a big time prospect without question. But I'm a Cam Ward guy based on tape.
He's a quarterback, and as I've heard you talk about previously, I can't remember which podcast it was that I heard you speaking about Cam Ward, but you believe him to be worthy of the number 1 overall pick.
I do. And I'm sure that's a point that reasonable people would disagree on, but I believe that based on tape. And I've done him. I did 7 or 8 games last summer from Washington State, and I think I did 8 or 9 games this year from the U.
So I guess from the follow-up for me would be, where do you believe, based on tape, that reasonable disagreement is born out of? Because if there was consensus at about a quarterback in a draft, we would know by now. Well, there was no disputing that Joe Burrow was going to be the number 1 overall pick.
Right.
That Trevor Lawrence was going to be the number 1 overall pick. And this year, that's not quite clear.
No, it's not. That's a great question because for me, I think he has really high-level traits. My guess is there are going to be people who believe that his lower body mechanics are not always what you want it to be. I've heard people say things like, well, there are plays in which he appears lackadaisical. Things like that. But I think in terms of...
From a mechanical standpoint, lackadaisical?
Just in kind of body language,
okay.
The way in which he plays,
okay.
But in terms of, he's got a live arm. He can play from the pocket. He can make plays outside of structure. I mean, there's a number of plays this year where he's running to his left and then he just drives the football. And again, it's not a as I said, I don't like to make comparisons, but, I always say to my interns, on the matchup show or to people I work with on the matchup show, if I see a play, I call them in and say, hey, look at this. If Patrick Mahomes did this, wouldn't we be saying that's unbelievable? So if Cam Ward does it, why are we not saying it's unbelievable?
Yeah.
And again, I this was not meant to be a direct comparison.
Sure.
Just the idea that if you're going to say that, wow, look at what Patrick Mahomes just did, then if someone else does something that's exactly the same, why are we not saying that that's great too?
Yeah. No, I think that's completely reasonable by you.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the more confusing parts of this specific draft cycle is why, I don't know, narratives are what they are, right?
Right.
The tape is the tape.
Right.
At the end of the day.
And the bottom line is this, and I don't know what Mike Borgonzi said, but in most drafts, there are 15 to 18 players that have true first-round grades. In this draft, I'm being told that there's only about 10.
Yeah.
But 32 teams have to draft in the first round. So you have to draft someone. And it's not a quarterback draft, and it's not a wide receiver draft. So there's a lot of positions and a lot of players who, in a vacuum, would technically not be first-round grade players who are going to get drafted in the first round.
Yeah.
Because you have to draft someone.
Right.
You're not going to say, nah, we pick 18, but we only had 10 guys who are first-round picks, so we're not going to draft. It doesn't work that way. So you know me well enough to know I don't sit around with, let me make a list. I just love to evaluate players.
Sure.
And talk about evaluations. And the one thing I always try to get across to people is this is not a mathematical equation. There's so many variables when it comes to players in terms of where they go, how they're coached, what scheme they're put in, how they're deployed, what do they have around them. There's so many factors that go into it. It's not a black and white 2+2 4 situation.
Selfishly, for our purposes, Greg, I hope the Titans do draft him because I would love to talk about a quarterback when we do the live show.
Yeah, I mean,
we'll be talking quarterback anyway.
We're going to be doing that anyway. They're either going to draft one or not draft one, and then the question is, by then, there's going to be, probably another quarterback on their roster one way or the other, and we'll be talking about it.
Absolutely. So for you, from a tape standpoint, the gulf between Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders,
to me, is meaningful. I mean, and the way I answer that question, and again, you always have to feel like you have to qualify this because the way people, they see it as a 2+2=4 thing, as an equation. The way the NFL has evolved with the way defenses play now is to be a pure pocket player, which is essentially what Shedeur Sanders is, okay, essentially. Can he run for a first down once in a while? Yeah, but he's a pocket quarterback. You have to be so good in the pre-snap phase and the post-snap phase. And the post-snap phase, by the way, has 10 variables that we could, talk about, which we can get into, over the course of the next month.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that Shedeur Sanders can't do that, but at his core, he's a ball distributor and an efficient executor of an offense. So what that means is he needs a good O-line. He needs a run game. He needs other pieces around him that are good players. He needs a defense so that he's not being asked early in his career to have to drop back 35 or 45 times every week. He needs to be in a situation where he doesn't have to put up 30 points every week and feel like every single drive, is an oh my God drive. You need a lot of things to be a pocket quarterback in this league. Like I would look at Shedeur Sanders, and by the way, like I said, he could end up being very good, but that's what he is.
Sure.
To me, he's not the same level of prospect as, let's say, C.J. Stroud coming out of Ohio State, who is very much stylistically similar. A pocket quarterback.
Right.
Stroud's got a better thrower and a bigger kid.
Yeah. Greg Cosell of NFL Films has been kind enough to sit down with us for a live version of the Install podcast. You can get more of this. It's just a taste. We get the testing getting going today. We get heights. We get weights. We get 40s. Yeah. We get all the good stuff. And we're looking forward to seeing how teams come out of this combine feeling about the personalities as well, because the individual analysis, the meetings, even though it's only 18 minutes in length, they certainly go out of their way to maximize those things, Greg, and it will certainly influence how these teams go about the draft process.
And it also influences the 30 players that the teams want to bring in.
Right.
Because if they interview a kid and they find out maybe they like his tape, but they interview a kid and go, oh my God, I don't like the kid at all, they may decide, hey, we don't want to draft this kid. Or maybe they look at a guy's tape and they're not sure, but then they interview the kid and they go, man, this kid, we want him in our building. So they learn a lot of things.
Yeah, we'll look forward to learning a lot more coming out of the week at Indianapolis. Certainly Greg has many more high-level conversations to have with much smarter people than me around the NFL.
Like I had with Kirby last night.
I'm telling you, I don't know if I could pick two better conversational people to go to dinner with than Greg Cosell and Kirby Allen Kirby. Kirby says it was so much fun last night. I'm sorry that I missed out, but I'm not sorry that I got to see my basketball team get a win.
You were down at IU, and you saw a win, which they've been a little few and far between this year, unfortunately.
I can always count on Greg. Greg has connections to Indiana as well.
With my older daughter having graduated from there.
So it makes me happy to be able to talk college basketball with Greg from time to time, and also to talk ball with Greg as we get ready for another draft process. Thank you, my friend.
Hey, this was fun.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
615-737-1045 if you would like to react to anything that Greg just had to say specific to the quarterbacks or any of the prospects that we talked about, and we can certainly talk about the gulf that Greg mentioned between those two top quarterback prospects coming up next.